Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, we got to do a little homework for this episode of the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. You know we hate to do that, but it was a really good question from one of our listeners. So we went the extra mile, which really is only about a quarter mile, but that's more than we normally do, and that is definitely extra. So let's start with this question from @VanGo_0. What are the 5 best individual seasons by a Buckeye player since 1990?
I always immediately think to one particular, and then a few years after that, another particular season surpassed that for me. So I know we'll get to those. I went first on the last show, Tom. I'll let you go ahead and give me one of yours, and then we will discuss it.
All right, so I'm going to start with this is one that I was a little surprised that this was the first one that popped to mind, but I'm going to start with K Dobbins in 2019. He had 301 carries, 2,003 yards, only 2,000-yard rusher in Ohio State history, 21 touchdowns, averaged 6.7 yards per carry, and I think you saw the importance of K Dobbins in that Fiesta Bowl where the offense was moving in one way and then he sprained his ankle and then all of a sudden the offense did not look the same after that. He was, that was not a season where it was they played 16 games, so he had a lot of help to get to. No, he just was dominant. That was one of the best single seasons for an Ohio State Buckeye. I don't think that's really number one on my list, but it's in my top 5. And it was the first one where, as I was thinking about this, that was the first one that popped to mind for me.
Yeah, it's always interesting. I was wondering, I wanted you almost to do this blind. So it's just like, Tom, right now, top 5 individual seasons, because, to see what pops up. But again, this is since 1990. So that negates the fact that Archie Griffin rushed for 2.3 yards more per game in 1973 than Dobbins did. So Dobbins was 143.1 yards per game in 2019, which is incredible. Archie went for 143.4. Keith Byers in 1984 went for 147. And Eddie George holds the record for 148.2. But 2,003 yards is more than 1,927 yards. I don't really have an issue with this. Maybe the next branch of questioning will be like, what is the best individual stretch? Because then I think you throw Ezekiel Elliott's 2014 postseason run in there, rushing for over 200 yards in each of those games. For me, the first guy that I think of in this question is Malik Hooker.
Yep.
His 2016 season where he had 70-some tackles, and I'll bring it up, but 7 interceptions, returned 3 of them for touchdowns, and was a very, very talented tackler. Just the perfect, not just insurance, but he actually paid you back. Like, this was the Limu Emu. This was Allstate. Like, you actually got money for this, and he would protect you. You were in good hands, Tom, with Malik Hooker, and he was a playmaker. He was dynamic. He was he's one of the great one-season wonders, as we know. 74 tackles, 43 of those were solo, 4 pass defended, and he's always number one for me, or he was. He's eventually surpassed, but that's the first guy I always think of.
Yeah, and just to put his season in perspective, he had 7 interceptions. He had 3 pick sixes. There actually was a 4th one that he ran back that got called back. But 7 interceptions. The entire Ohio State team had 8 interceptions all of last season, and Malik Hooker had 7 in 2016. And that was not a year where they were, they didn't play in the Big Ten championship game that year. They only played in 1 college football playoff game. So that was in 13 games. So that was that's a remarkable season by any stretch.
And he was 8th on the team in scoring.
Yeah, which is insane for a defensive player. I'm going to go a little off the board here. Okay. I think there's a quarterback that we're going to have to talk about, but I want to take this one just because I think we need to have a little bit of offensive line representation. You can choose your Orlando Pace season. He did not allow a sack in either 1995 or 1996. The 1996 Ohio State Media Guide credits him with 80 8-0 pancake blocks in 1995. He had 10 pancake blocks in the Illinois game alone in 1995. 10 pancake blocks in one game. That is, it's not that easy to come up with stats for an offensive lineman. And that is a lot of credit to former Ohio State SID Jerry Emig for, sort of turning that into a thing that season, and the Orlando Pace pancake magnets and all that kind of stuff. And he finished, second in the Heisman that year. So in 96. So, that is in terms of just most dominant Ohio State seasons, greatest individual Ohio State seasons since 1990. I know we are going to have flashy quarterback stats, and there's probably some more defensive players we need to talk about, but I don't know that you can have this conversation without talking about Orlando Pace.
No, and the fact that they created basically stats for him gives you an idea, because they wanted to be able to not just give somebody some just a way to judge without having to watch, because you can't watch all of these guys, and you don't watch the offensive line, you're watching the ball. Mm-hmm. He finished fourth in the Heisman Trophy that year. Danny Werfel won it. Troy Davis from Iowa State, because he went for 2,000 yards, had to be up there, and that was basically almost a rule back then, if you rush for 2,000 yards. And then Jake Plummer was third in that, but 87 first place votes for Orlando Pace. I don't agree with I don't disagree with any of those, but that was also, for me, a very disappointing outcome for Orlando Pace, because it was, you could watch him instead of watching the ball, and you'd enjoy the game. So I don't have any issue with that one. I think that's a good one. Can I stay in that same era and go with Mike Vrabel, who in 1995, in 13 games, 63 tackles, 26 tackles for loss, which was still a school record, 13 sacks, so a sack a game, 4 forced fumbles, blocked a point after, and he was wrecking quarterbacks for basically three years there. I think he's somebody that we forget about because it was 30 odd years ago. But you look back and his numbers are still there. And the fact that he had more tackles that year than Antoine Winfield. Luke Fickell, credit 61 tackles that year as the nose tackle, but 44 solo tackles, which was fifth on the team, tied with actually just one below Antoine Winfield. So I think he was one of the really players of the 90s for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I think that's one where he was not someone who came up as a Heisman finalist, and I'm going to just sort of lump the Chase Young conversation in here, because you've got the tackles for loss. Vrabel has Young. Young had 16 and a half sacks in only 12 games that year. You can thank Mike Loxley for that. That was probably the single most dominant individual season you've seen out of an Ohio State defensive player. But the Vrabel stats were just, again, incredible. And just a little bit, it's, as you said, I think it's just a little bit lost in all the other stuff from back then. There were just so many big production seasons out of guys right around that time. We're talking about a lot of guys, and we could be talking about a lot of other guys who played on some of those teams with Vrabel. Eddie George, Terry Glenn, Orlando Pace. I mean, you've got lots of guys who we could be talking about here, and he was just sort of like one of the guys on that team that was a really, really outstanding player. But yeah, I think he and Chase Young probably belong in this conversation somewhere. We need to, if we're talking about just incredible stats, we need to talk about Dwayne Haskins. Dwayne Haskins, 2018, 373 for 533, 7% completion, 4,831 yards passing, 50 touchdowns, 9.4 yards per attempt, 8 interceptions. I mean, that was a year where I had a recurring column every week that was just the Dwayne Haskins record watch. It was just, what records is Dwayne Haskins? What records did he just break? What records is he about to break? What records is he on pace to break? And he was really a one-season guy. And you look at where he is on the career lists, and it's like he's shockingly high in a bunch of career stats when he really only pretty much just played that 1 year. Obviously played the Michigan game and some mop-up time in 2017. But it was really a 1-year thing for him, and he just piled up numbers in a way that he carried that Ohio State team that was not, it did not have a great defense that year, did not have a good defense that year, was good, but that was the K Dobbins kind of took a little bit of a step back that year. Mike Weber, the running game was just kind of okay, but man, he just almost single-handedly carried them to the Rose Bowl that year.
He has 23 more career passing yards than Justin Fields, who started for 2 seasons, one of those being a COVID season, has more passing yards than Braxton Miller, who didn't get to finish out his career as a quarterback, more passing yards than Craig Krenzel. But yeah, 5 400-yard games and a 6th, which was 396 yards and 6 touchdowns against Michigan. So yeah, one of the greatest individual seasons, absolutely belongs up here, and it was a different time. It was a different time watching Ohio State just throw the ball around. And then, I mean, I don't want to just go right off of Dwayne Haskins, but CJ Stroud also had in 2021, I think, had 5 400-yard games, and that was a kind of a defensive issue as well. But Haskins, they were just running tempo. They were deep at receiver. They couldn't run the ball very well, so this was their best option. And they just tore people apart, and it was fun to watch. It did create questions of, is Ohio State ever going to get back to running the ball? And they certainly did the next year, where they led the Big Ten in rushing with K Dobbins and Justin Fields. Yeah, he was one of my 5 one of my 3 that I wrote down, because for me it's Malik Hooker, Chase Young, and Dwayne Haskins, and I think Young surpassed my Hooker for me. Jackson Smith and Jigba's 2021 season belongs up here somewhere. Terry Glenn's 1995 season might be the most dominating receiver performance I've seen at Ohio State, and he averaged 23 yards a catch, and just it was like people weren't ready for him in terms of the secondaries. College football defenses weren't necessarily ready for him. And maybe he wasn't ready for some of the hard turfs that he was landing on and missing some time. But overall, I think anybody else that you wanted to mention that didn't get a chance?
I think you covered the rest of my list there. Jackson Smith-Njigba was the only other guy I was going to bring up, and you mentioned him there. 95 catches, 1,606 yards, 9 touchdowns. But that was just that Rose Bowl game was, and I understand the caveat of, they'd had a running back playing and yada, yada, yada. But man, that was one of the single greatest individual performances in a game. That was one of the single greatest individual performances in a season. And, to not have gotten to see him in 2022, that is going to be one of the great what ifs in Ohio State history. Is think about how good that 2022 season was. If you just had a healthy Jackson Smith-Njigba, then would that have been like? But yeah, the 2021 season for him was just, completely rewrote the record books.
Yeah. So go ahead and give us your top 5 individual seasons. We'd like to see those. Be interested to see if we've left anybody off of this list, and whether you're wrong or we're wrong. It's always up for debate. If you're watching, go ahead and hit the thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you've not yet done so. Hit the bell to be notified, and of course, 5-star ratings and reviews on the audio side of things. That will do it from here. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you all later.